What's good, y'all? Elvis here, back again with another tutorial. Today we're doing something simple, just a wave cut, we're keeping it dark with a taper on the sides and the back. But first we're combing the hair, laying it down in its natural position, and now we're gonna be cutting down the crown. He wanted it dark, roughly about a 1, but here I'm going with a 1.5, kind of just going around the crown rather than trying to dig in, because with wavers, their crown is a very delicate area. It doesn't lay down evenly in one direction, so if you're not going with the grain, it's super easy to gap it. So I like to be safe, and I'd much rather just come back later and lay everything down than to cut it too short and now I gotta change the whole cut. So we're continuing cutting it down to a 1, but pro tip, I like to cut, for my wavers, I like to cut down with a 1 guard open and then close it, just because if I was to go in with a 1 guard closed off gate, I might gap them depending on how the hair is laying down. So rather be safe than sorry. But here we're starting with the taper with our first initial guideline with the clipper closed. It's a low taper, so we're keeping it low, a little bit above the ear, and now we're opening it up with our second guideline, and then we're just going to be blending it before we put in the third. Next, I'm grabbing my Andis Super ZR2s with a 1.5 blade on there. That's roughly equivalent to a half guard or a 0 guard, depending on your brand of clippers. But I don't even blend with that. Next, I take my Andis Masters, my all reliables, and I start flicking out that line. Most people don't know you can blend from a clipper close to a 1 with a Andis Master, but most clippers really, I found it to be easiest with the Masters, just because the teeth of the blade are long and it allows you to finesse with the blade, if you understand what I'm saying. Here I grab my Babyliss Pro FXs. I got a 1 guard on there with the blade open, and I'm not really focusing on putting in a guideline, because a 1 guard open against the grain is basically equivalent to a 1 guard closed with the grain, and that's the length we have on top. So this is the last guideline, so it's gonna start blending before I actually start blending. So here I'm taking the clipper, closing the blade, and going with the grain, just to kind of smooth that bulk in that area where that guideline I put in and the top of the hair meet. Alright, so here we're blending in the top of the sideburn into the taper. Just like how I said before, you can blend from a clipper closed all the way into a 1. I like to just not use any guards on the side taper or whatnot, just because using less tools cuts your time down, but then also being more proficient with the tools that you have just generally makes you a better barber. On this side, we're doing the exact same steps, but I like to do the tapers independently, because I used to get into a habit of putting a guideline on each side and having to blend those out and alternating back and forth. But I realized that kind of approach took my focus out of perfecting the blend, and I was really just trying to perfect the steps. But if I blend the sides independently, then the fade is more cohesive, it seems like. But then also a thing to take into account is that people's hair growth patterns are different. So if you're doing one side then the other and alternating between, the habit is to be symmetrical with how you're blending, but the hair doesn't lay symmetrical on both sides most of the time. So here we're starting the taper on the back. It's basically the same steps, just spread over a larger area. But something I want y'all to pay attention to is that you can see he has a slight crease on the back of his head. And a lot of people have that, and that can be very problematic depending on the haircut you're doing and your technique. Because this is a low taper and I don't want to cause problems for myself, I'm going to keep the blend underneath that, so I'm not actually blending in the area of where the crease is on his head, because if you're blending in that area, it's almost impossible for it to look smooth, even if it is. So as I'm doing this taper, I want to keep the blend below the crease, but then also I want to keep the hair on the crease and slightly below the crease dark, just so it's less apparent. There's less contrast, so it'd be a better overall appearance. This clip is a little sped up, but something I want y'all to pay attention to is that every time I take the blade off the scalp, I'm changing the lever. So every stroke in this blending process is very, very intentional. And I feel like that's something a lot of barbers be slacking on, because I know when I first started cutting, I just felt like if I just keep flicking, the blend will come out. But it's not necessarily about how much you're flicking, but exactly how you're flicking and where you're flicking. All right, so right here, I threw a 1.5 guard on, and I want y'all to notice this because that's longer than the one I went on top with. But around this crease, and especially around the crown, I want to be careful about cutting the hair too low. So I'd rather cut it slightly longer and have it appear dark than to be the exact same length as the rest of the hair, but appear light. A lot of times with haircuts, it's smoke and mirrors, really. Like, I used to think all the hair had to be the same length. I was really a perfectionist about everything got to be the exact same level, but it doesn't have to be the same level. It just has to be the same appearance. So now we're lining up the back, but you just saw me take my Andis Masters open and just kind of graze some of the hairs along the back lineup and around the ear. That is a pro tip, because what usually makes a lineup look fuzzy or not as clean is a hair that grows over. So if you go ahead and trim those hairs before you line them up, then the cut will come out a lot crispier, but then also it'll last longer because the hair will take longer to grow over the line. So just like how I trim the hair behind the ears, I'm trimming the front down with a 1 guard, just so it's a little cleaner. And here, I'm wiping his hairline with first a paper towel with some alcohol, but then another paper towel with some holding spray. Then I throw the blow dryer on it to freeze the hair. Now we start with the lineup. Of course, you want to start in the middle, then move to the corner that's slightly higher, and just make that match with the middle, then make the other side parallel with that. But with my lineup process, I like to jump from side to side, and that's all fine and dandy when I'm cutting, but it feels really, really awkward in front of a camera. So I feel like these angles are not ideal, but this is a work in progress. Now we're lining up the sidebar, and one thing I like to do to help me with placement, I guess, of the line is to see, let's say, both sides of your client's head and see where his lineup or how his lineup matches with his eyebrows, because eyebrows are almost always symmetrical for anybody. Even if the head might not be symmetrical, the eyebrows are usually symmetrical. But here, now we're cleaning up the line with the razor. This is really my first pass with the razor. If I'm being honest, it's more of a rough draft than anything. I'm gonna be coming up with the trimmers behind this just to get layover hairs and to see where the line isn't as straight as it could be. The razor is what really shows me the symmetry of the lineup. Now for the beard lineup, I like to line up the beard, or at least the top of the beard, with the straight razor, and then everything else with the clipper. But of course, you're gonna want to pull the skin tight, and you never want to move the blade side to side. You always want to be moving it up and down, because if you move it side to side, even slightly diagonally, you are likely to cut your client. All right, so we're basically done with his beard, and now we're just gonna be trimming down his mustache. Some people like to use a 1 guard. I like to just rake it over with a no guard open, just to get, it gets about a 1 length. But now we're just lining up his mustache, getting the hairs in the corners that be getting into his mouth, of course. Here's a pro tip. Everybody has cellus hairs on their face and on their forehead and whatnot. And if you clean it up with a razor, it makes the line look even crispier. All right, now we're finishing up with the crown. And before any waivers send me any hate mail, here I'm taking a 1.5 guard open and just raking all over just to get the hair down, because right now I'm really trying to find where his crown and how his wave pattern actually really wants to lay. So 1.5 open against the grain is roughly equal to 1.5 with the grain. But now I'm taking a 1 guard open, which is basically equivalent to a 1.5, and raking along the direction of his natural wave pattern now that I've cut it down and it's become more visible. All right, so for the most part, we're done at this point, but we're just going back over everything with a 1 guard close just to make sure we didn't miss any patches of hair or anything, because we did originally cut this with a 1 guard open. So making sure everything's laid down. Blowing off your client, make sure they're nice and comfortable, get all the hair off of them. And then the hose doesn't get everything, so I like to use a microfiber towel because it picks up everything. I'm talking about sweat, debris, all that. All right, so at this point, I already gave my client the mirror, make sure he liked everything. But I saw some hairs on his cheek and the back of his head, so I wanted to just clean up all those, make sure I didn't leave any of that behind. So I grabbed the shears real quick to get some strays off, but I realized his hair is laying down so well anyway, that was kind of pointless. So I started brushing his hair to get loose hair off his scalp. Most of my clients come in with their hair already washed, so all I really got to do is just get the hair off of them. Even though I have a complimentary shampoo service at no extra charge, my clients are just kind of accustomed to washing their hair beforehand. So we're dusting the loose hair off, and then we're gonna put some oil sheen in his hair, just give it some shine. If I'm being 100%, I feel like oil sheen doesn't do all that much, but it makes you feel like you got a fresh cut. It makes it feel complete. And don't forget the hair under the cape. You cannot let your client leave with a hairy neck. All right, and that's the cut. I appreciate y'all watching. If you got any game, you enjoyed the video, go ahead and like and subscribe. But till next time, craft over clout, I'm out.